It's March 27th. I'm at the Robert Schnibbe residence at 8 Edmarth Place. And this is Abby Mason for the Hastings World War II Oral History Project. I'm with Robert Schnibbe at his home at 8 Edmarth Place. And we're going to speak about his experiences in Hastings and his war experiences. Robert, before telling me your experiences in Hastings and in the service during World War II, can you tell me a little about yourself, where you were born, when you were born?
Well, I was born in Woodhaven, Long Island, Queens. In fact, they used to use the name Long Island, but they don't use it anymore. It was Woodhaven, Long Island, New York, but they just use Woodhaven, New York now. But I went to St. John's in Brooklyn and just traveled back and forth to school. And I went through grammar school in Hastings, but then rather in Woodhaven. And then I went to high school in Brooklyn. But then right after high school, I wanted to enlist in the Navy. But what happened, if you enlist in the Navy at that particular time, you have to go in for 6 years. Because it was wartime.
What year are we talking about?
Oh, talking 42. The end of 1942.
And you were how old?
And I was 19. Just 19. I was just 19 in that November. So then I got involved with the draft deal because I didn't want to go for 4 years. So what they, I think it was 6 years, 6 years at that time. It was automatic, 6 years. So what I did, I just got involved with the draft ahead of time and before they called me. So then eventually they put me in with it and I eventually went. But in the meantime, what I did was I came up here and worked for my Uncle Jack Riley in the service station because he was short-handed and there were problems with the gasoline because you had ration stickers and that. And only 3 gallons of gas you get. A passenger car would get 3 gallons, a truck would get 5, and then big commercial deals would get more, but they're all individual stamps. I have a frame with all the stamps in it somewhere in the house here. I'll find it someday, but it shows all the stamps of the thing. But anyway, then I worked for him, I guess, for a couple of months, something like that, till they called me. And but in the meantime, which was very interesting, at that time, not selling much gasoline because you were limited. Because I guess it was like the gasoline shortage of just a few years back type of thing. As soon as a gas truck would be in sight, everybody would follow it. They will follow it, and they'd all have their 3-gallon deals, and it's hard enough working a pump today with stopping it on the exact number.
Now, is this 3 gallons?
The price of gas today, you can't even see the numbers move. It's going so fast.
Was this 3 gallons per week?
Well, it was like that, 3 gallons per week, and certain things you'd be allowed more. You'd have to go to the ration board if you had some specific problem, or maybe if you had a sick relative in some distance, they'd give you extra amount. But just for local knocking around, you couldn't get much gas. Most of the people didn't use their cars. I mean, another thing, if you wore your tires out, you couldn't get tires. You couldn't get tires. And so then, but one of the big things at that time, he was one of the pickup centers for the salvage. And that was a big thing that we were doing while we were doing the gas and different miscellaneous work on cars, tires, and all that type of thing. But there wasn't that much. What we were doing was collecting newspapers, toothpaste, the metal toothpaste things, anything metal, anything, and paper drives, or collecting paper. People bringing metal, they were bringing old license plates in, and we had a storeroom downstairs. We just keep piling it in, and then he'd come and take it. But I often told Ann today, geez, I don't know what would happen if that had to be done today. The kids wouldn't, they don't even turn in nickel cans.
Right.
But anyway, so then I
Getting back to the gas
Okay,
for a minute,
yeah.
when people had so little gas, did you know a lot of people in Hastings at that time?
Not too many, because I was only here the period of the month. But I came here over the years. Of course, my aunt and uncle actually met in Lake Placid, New York, just before the 1932 Olympics. I mean, in 1928 or 29 or something. That's where they were both vacation. They met, and so then they were courting, and they got married in 1930. In fact, my aunt is still living. She's 98 years old, and she lives in Sussex Hall in Dobbs Ferry. She's lived there in this same apartment since 1930, when that building was brand new, in the same beautiful apartment. And but she's 98, and she's still getting around in the apartment, and out once in a while, but she needs to help all the time. But anyway, where are we now?
We talking about the gas.
Okay, the gas now. Okay.
Do you remember what the price of gas was in those days?
Oh, I don't know. It's like 10, 15 cents a gallon, I think, something like that. You know, it was. But then today, that doesn't even cover a smidge of the taxes on it.
Right.
But
what happened? Were there people who always seemed to have more gas, or people who demanded more gas? I mean, was there a black market in gas here?
Well, it was. I guess there was a black market stuff going on, but I wasn't here really long enough. But I know my uncle, he wouldn't be involved in any of that, because he was just so straight, you know. And he really had an awful hard time for those 4 years of that rough period, you know. But he survived it.
How did people, if you say people weren't using their cars, in a town like this, how would kids have gotten to school, or gone marketing?
Well, most of the people walked, or they would get a ride from somebody else, or maybe carpooling I guess that was the original carpooling deal. I should imagine, Tompkins Avenue wasn't built at the time, but say Uniontown, I should imagine if a woman was going to the store, she'd call all her neighbors and say, okay, it's Monday, all of us will go to the store, and they all go at the same time. And then you had the public bus. I'm not familiar with the taxis, though, but they did have taxis, but I don't know what. That was Marty Howland and Jack Kane. They had a taxi service, but I don't know what the story was on that.
Yeah.
In fact, they had the school buses.
And what about people who had cars and a part broke down, a fan belt or something like that? Were parts hard to come by?
Parts were hard to come by. You'd always make some connection. There were a few parts places around, but they were as slow as everybody else, you know. And but parts were hard to get. And like fan belts at that time, there weren't that many different kinds. You know what I mean? You could like a generator at that time. You could stretch the rod longer, or put an extension on the rod that holds the thing. You know, all types of.
You'd have to get creative.
You'd have to be very creative to do these things, you know. And it was a hard struggle. You know, but then.
What did people do about tires? I remember retreads and.
Well, they were doing. I recall they were doing recapping. They call it recapping, you know. And then eventually they did the retreading, which was putting the grooves in. But the recapping was a big thing. Well, they still do it. These pieces of tire you see on the road nowadays, that's all from truck recaps. And the recaps on trucks, they're on the back. They're not on the front. All brand new tires on the front of the trucks. Those pieces that you see flying off are out of a 10-wheel truck. Maybe it's it's one piece out of one wheel, which doesn't affect anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it'll make him thump in that time.
Anne had mentioned something about people were not really allowed to drive around much. Sometimes they would have to have a serviceman in the car with them if they wanted to drive somewhere. Do you recall anything like that?
Not too much myself, but I understand how it was, though, where they, if you're relative or son or somebody came home from the service, they would allow you more gasoline. I mean, not to go to California or anything like that, but I mean more gasoline. I forget how much, but they would. You'd go to the local board, which I think was White Plains at that time, not sure, or Yonkers, and they would allow you more gasoline. And I don't know how they would do it, how they would judge, but it wouldn't be a deal where you could go gallivanting, you know, and sort of just for let the servicemen go see their friends in other cities or places, but no long trips really, you know.
What was the name of the gas station?
It was J.T. Riley service station.
And was it in the same location?
Same location. Well, it took the whole corner from North Street, well, to the old post office, which is Bob Brady's office now, and the whole length there. But we had on the north end, there was a little brick building. That was built in 1930, and that's the building I was working in. And we had 2 pumps out front, and 2 pumps in the driveway. Actually, the driveway was gravel, the little gravel stones, and that was one of the things every morning you had to go out and rake the gravel and pick the papers out of it and push your cigarette butts underneath it. You know? But that's when you also had the octagon block sidewalks, where you'd octagon blocks. The approach was all the blocks, but underneath those blocks, I know my uncle demanded when they were put in that they put concrete under it, because you can picture cars going over it all the time. There'd be ridges just where they were going in and out.
Yeah.
And
were people in Hastings basically cooperative about the gas shortage, as you recall?
They were. I mean, they sort of had to put up with it. I mean, and then I guess something like that. That shortage is probably different than these shortages we've had these 15 years ago. And that at that time, I mean, if you really probably gave anybody a hard time, they'd consider you anti-American or something, or not helping the war effort. You know what I mean? It was all, everybody had to do everything to try to help the war effort. You know, do a lot of sacrificing, and people just they learned not to use their cars, and it just became a way of life.
Way of life.
The
Right.
people probably more healthy. They probably did more walking.
I'm sure. Yeah. I understand there was a canteen for servicemen. Can you tell me about that?
Well, yes, right after, actually, it was just as I was coming home. I came home in the end of November after Thanksgiving of, 45. 45 I came home. And that's when in fact, what did happen let me get back to when I was younger.
Okay.
My mother died when I was 9 years old, and so it was my sister, my older brother, and another brother, myself, the 4 of us, and my father. My father worked for Western Electric as an accountant, actually, you know, for Western Electric. But anyway, the 4 of us and my father lived in the house. But then my sister got married around that time, and so she moved away. Then my older brother, he went in the Navy. And then my brother, just a little older than me, he went in the Navy also, but he was connected with the Merchant Marine. He was a naval officer in the Merchant Marine. Then I went in. My father wound up selling the house in Woodhaven, and he moved out to Flushing, near where my sister was. So then our Woodhaven connection sort of disappeared then, you know. So, and then that was really right after I was the last one going into service. So that was right after that. My father just disbanded everything, you know. So anyway, then after coming back, when I came back here, well, actually I stayed with an aunt in Brooklyn, which was close to Queens, where my old hangout was. You know, so when you go back, you go to your old haunts, you know. So I was going out there, but then I come up I came up here, and then I started to work with my Uncle Jack. But what happened, what he didn't donate more. He let them use the present building I'm in. He used to have a Buick car dealership there, and that was a big open room. And he let the village and mentioned to them, I'll allow you, if you want, to use this as a homecoming thing for all the veterans. For the veterans to come home and meet at this club and everything else like that. So I forget, that lasted, I don't know, maybe for a few months before. But it was a temporary thing anyway. I mean, he told me it's temporary because I have to do something to get income.
Right, so this so it happened like after the war that it was a canteen? It wasn't a canteen for soldiers during the war?
No, not during the war. Okay, then, all right, that's what happened for that period of time. And I'll pick up with that building after that, but let me go back to that during the war.
Okay.
During the war, he rented the building out to the Farragut Corporation, and they, they had that building, they used that, and they had the Pace Pearl building on Aqueduct Lane, the big red brick building that's renovated into loft apartments. They had that building, it's Farragut, and they made airplane parts. They made airplane parts, and if you speak to a lot of the old-timers in the village, somebody or other worked for either one of the places. Ann worked, she worked for one of them. She worked for this particular place here. I mean, I don't know how much work she did because she's in high school at the time, you know. And it's all according to how many high school kids they had working in the same place at the same time. You know, how much work you got done. But anyway, they had the two buildings. So okay, he rented that to them during the war, and after that, all right, then it went into the canteen. But then when the canteen was over with, Mrs. Amos Cronell came to my uncle when it was going to end. Came to my uncle and asked him, "Would you let us use the place for the first youth center?"
Huh.
So that is actually the first youth center in town. That building actually. So then it was all fixed up from before. You know, they had the thing decorated and everything like that. So all it did was continue on. But so then he let them. I don't know how long they used it. Maybe a few months or something like that. So then after that, Mrs. Cronell and some other woman, and it was a women's club that did it. They moved down to Southside Avenue.
How do you spell Cronell?
Connell. Connell. Mrs. Amos Connell. She lived up on Overlook Road or somewhere up in Hudson Heights. And so then after that, we just used the building for working on cars, taking them in there, working on, leaving them there, and we could leave them. Of course, we were operating out of the other building, the little red brick building. And then my uncle. I should get back to, my cousin and I were working there, so we were working out of both places. But my uncle was in the big place, you know, he wanted to be around, and then...
This is in 42?
No, this is in 46.
46,
after the war, you know.
Okay.
So, as I said, I came back at the end of 45, and I guess I started there and helping them in December then or something, I forget, in the end of 45. And then we were there for about 2 years. Then about 47, then bought the business from my uncle. But he still wanted the old haunts. He still stayed in the big building that Farragut and other used. And he had a little room there and putted around in that machine shop. You know, because an old guy wants to keep his hands in things, you know. But he was retired, you know. But and then we just worked out of the other building, and then eventually in 1950, my uncle died in 1953. So then in 1954, we renovated this building, which was his building, and then the Farragut and the youth deal and all veterans deal and that. We wound up renovating that whole building and making it into what it is today, and tore the little red brick building down. The red brick building was directly behind where the pumps are now, back to where those tire racks. It was a small building. And the pumps were the pumps were in the same place where they are now. So that was it. That was back in 1954, so that's the way it is now, you know.
Do you remember, while you were here during the war, waiting to go into the service, do you remember anything about how Hastings was? I mean, were there any servicemen who were coming back or wounded or?
Not really, because I was sort of just here for that short time. I'll tell you, I was coming up here since I was a kid, because from 1930 when my aunt and uncle got married, I used to come up a lot of times to just visit and stay for a few days and that. And I parted with my uncle. But I tell you, one of the first fellows I met in Hastings was Dan Ryle. Dan Ryle, in fact, he lived right up here in the corner up on Maple Avenue. But he was in the service I met him when I was, say, younger, but at that particular time he was in the service. But Dan, well, as everybody knows, was a great guy.
Yeah.
But at that, I wasn't here long enough before the war to really know anybody, you know.
Yeah. And did you meet Anne at that point, or?
Well, no, I met her in 1946, I guess. She lived in the big old house where Dr. Pagello is. Yeah, the big railroad type 3-story house, and where Dr. Pagello has the office. That's where she lived, and that's where I met her. You know, she'd always be walking by, but she was only a kid then. Yeah.
Do you recall any social things that went on in your time before you went into service, such as bond rallies or dances or?
No, they had the typical bond deals, with Anaconda with the bond drive, and they got the Big E a couple of times and whatever it was and that. But as I said, I wasn't here long enough for that period of time. Then you're young enough where you don't particularly bother with too much, you know what I mean? You don't get involved with anything in any area, you know.
Right. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your war service.
Well, I was very fortunate. I mean, after I went in, I went through boot camp up in Sampson, New York, which is it's near Geneva, near Hobart College and the college area up there. And it was a big base right on Seneca Lake. And actually Seneca Lake is 600 feet deep in the middle. Mm-hmm. And I was there in the wintertime, and it was cold. It was cold and windy. And now it's a beautiful New York State Park. And the Sampson group, all of us, have the old brig as a museum, and it's being renovated. And right now it's 3/4 finished, and it's beautiful. If anybody's up in that area, they should go in there. It's a beautiful state park. And as you approach it, as you go in the entranceway, there's a big sailor carrying a sea bag, and the sailor with the sculpture was done by Llewellyn, the fellow that did the Iwo Jima.
Oh,
the Iwo Jima. It's beautiful. And you go in there, and then the brig is a short ways down. It's a solid red brick building, which is beautiful, and it's being renovated. And it's probably 3/4 finished now. And right out front, there's a big 5-inch gun off a Navy ship, and there's a 3-inch gun on the side, and it's really an active organization. In fact, Waterloo, New York, which is right near there, is where the Memorial Day was originally started. And every year they have the Memorial Day on parade on that particular day. And we go up to it every year. Mm. And we march in it with the Sampson group, and it's a big group of people, you know. But it's a big state park, the whole area. And it's actually the only Navy building left on the property. All the other buildings are just warehouses and things like that, you know. And but we go there every year. In fact, we go twice a year, and then have different reunions in this area and everything referring to that. But as far as, and it's some of the local boys that went to Sampson, they belonged to it also. I mean, with boot training there. But anyway, from there I went to the Naval Receiving Station in Norfolk, Virginia. So from there, then I was transferred to a ship, the USS Paducah. It was a gunboat, and it went out into the Atlantic, and we cruised all around the Atlantic in Chesapeake Bay area, and we taught the Armed Guard how to fire the guns. And the Armed Guard is a division of the Navy, which is very big. They were the gunners on merchant ships. Every merchant ship had a Navy gun crew on it, and they had guns, like 5-inch guns and things on the bow and the stern, and machine gun deals and everything. And in fact, that's where my brother Walter, he was a U.S. Navy officer on a merchant ship. Merchant ships had a Navy engineer and a Navy deck officer. And he was a deck officer and bridge officer and that. And the Navy gun crew. But then they'd have your regular civilian merchantmen. And so we taught those Navy fellas that were going to be the gunners on those ships. We taught them. So I was on there for a while, and then I guess a year and a half, something like that. So then, you know, when you're young and everything, you get itchy feet. You don't want to stay in one spot, you know. So I asked for a transfer. So then what they did, I was transferred to a yard oiler, and they were just building it. So that yard, well, the Paducah, the gunboat, that had about 175 men on it. But the yard oiler was YO-178. They had numbers, not names, you know. So that had about 22 men. It was great. I mean, the Navy regulations went out the window, out the porthole, you know.
What's a yard oiler?
It's a tanker. You see them going up and down the river here, those small tankers, those self-propelled tankers that go up the river here, the small ones, not the ones being pulled by tugs or anything like that. And it's great. They're a little bigger, the same design as this, but a little bigger. And that was, I loved that duty. I mean, that's in fact, if I stayed in, I would have wanted to stay on one of them, you know, but stayed on it. But anyway, then we took that from the East Coast of, I was in the Atlantic theater, and that, but I was never involved in any problems, war fightings or anything else like that. Not involved in any of that. So then then we picked up this yard oiler and took it out to the South Pacific. Took it down through the Panama Canal and out to the Pacific. But it was we carried fuel oil, aviation gas once in a while too, you know. But the fuel oil, and but going down, taking from here down, it wasn't bad. But going across the Mississippi Delta, you could tell when you were going by because all the brown mud was coming out in a big stream. But anyway, in the meantime, while I was on this yard oil, getting prepared to go on it, I went through firefighting school and gunnery school and all this sort of stuff because you had to go through all the things. Anyway, you took it through the Panama Canal and then up the west coast of Mexico. And so we were in Panama just for a couple of days, you know, in the Balboa and in Panama itself. So then we're taken up, but the strange part about going up the west side of Mexico, you can see a lot of sea turtles, you know, and one of the things, if we had to pull in Mexico, in any part of the west coast of Mexico, you had to have $2 bills because the Mexicans didn't trust the Americans, and they know they wouldn't waste time making counterfeit $2 bills. So, but we didn't stop there. But everybody had a load of $2 bills in case we did stop. But then I went up to San Diego, and we stayed in San Diego for I don't know, a couple of weeks or a month, something like that. But anyway, well, getting back to my brothers, my one brother was in a merchant marine. In fact, we couldn't find him for a year, because the conversing with merchant marine, and because they actually worked for companies, like the big lines. And anyway, it wound up when I did find out where he was in the Persian Gulf on a tanker. And then, but anyway, when I was leaving San Diego, my brother Harry, the older one, I knew he was somewheres out there. So I went to he was a bomb disposal officer, and that's taking bombs apart that didn't go off.
Boy.
So anyway, I went into the bomb disposal office, and I went in there, and I asked him, I said, this is something, I don't know if you're allowed to tell me or not, but my brother is in bomb disposal like you fellows and that. And I said, he's somewhere in the Pacific. I wonder if you could tell me where he is. And the fellow said, what's his name? I said, Harry Schnibbe. Harry Schnibbe. He said, heck, he said, I went to Fordham with him. He said, I'll tell you where he is. He's in Pearl Harbor right now. So anyway, after we're conversing back and forth, and he told me where he was, and my brother Harry's in charge of the bomb disposal unit in Pearl Harbor. So he told me Fitzgerald told me where he was. So when we got to Pearl Harbor, I contacted him. Being on a small ship, we were lucky because you'd stop all different places, And the ship only went 9 knots. Top speed was 9 knots. And we're in convoys all the time, and you're, you have ships all over the place, and you're right one of the little flags in there, And one thing I'll tell you about these convoys also, I tell the kids at the garage, I said, in the Navy as well as the Army, any place, you really have to follow orders because some mistake you make could be fatal. And I tell you, I should backtrack a little. I was a quartermaster. Actually, a quartermaster in the Navy is different than the Army. The Army is supplies. A quartermaster in the Navy is the bridge gang, the signal and bridge gang, which is great because you're right there with the captain alongside of you, either steering the ship or working signals or flags or some deal like that. Very, very interesting, And so anyway, and then you have the fellow, the helmsman, the fellow on the wheel. We'd take turns and different guys in that. But when you were ordered from the captain to go 5 degrees to the starboard, which is to the right, if you went 5 degrees to the port, you'd be going left, and you'd be right into the whole pile of ships in the convoy. So you really had to pay attention, and naturally, other people naturally paying attention with you. If you went the wrong way, they would yell right away. But I don't think there were probably a lot of mistakes made. But then I forget it. I honestly forget time, but it took a long time getting from San Diego to Pearl Harbor, and because of the ship could only, top speed was 9 knots, and the whole convoy was going slow. But the convoy is loaded with battleships and destroyers and cruisers and everything, and then merchant ships. Merchant ships and everything, and all the big ships are surrounding the outside with all the big equipment and everything else like that. So anyway, when we got to Pearl Harbor, I was going to spend a couple of weeks there, actually, right in Pearl Harbor itself. So when I got there, I contacted. In fact, my brother knew I was coming because the fellow in San Diego notified him in some manner. So when I got to Pearl Harbor, I called him, and so he was a lieutenant actually, and he ran the whole bomb disposal base, and so he naturally came right over the shipyard where I was, and. In fact, I was out with him a few different nights. The captain of our ship just let me go and come as I pleased, because he was there, And so we'd go out together at night and that. And then one day he gave us a carry-all car, a truck, like it's like a big Suburban, a big long Suburban now. And so I took a whole, I don't know how many, whatever fit 10 guys, and we just toured the whole island. And the island of Oahu, just went around all over the place. I think we shot a whole tank of gasoline going around and around. But then after that, I left there. We left there after a couple of weeks. Then we went out to the...
Now, what year are we talking about now?
We're talking 44, I think the end of 44. 44 into 45. Yeah, 44 into 45. And then we went out to the different islands, like Johnson Island was a small island. We didn't stop there, we passed it. That's that little island just west of Hawaiian Islands. But we went within distance where we could see it. And so then we went out to the Kwajalein, and we stayed there for a while, and then we went over to all the other islands, and the Marshall Islands and the Marianas Islands, just traveled around. But our main port was what they call Kwajalein. And we came back to Kwajalein, and then see what we would actually do. The small tanker would take from the big tankers and take it into the shallow water and distribute it to the ships in the shallow water. See, because the big ocean-going tankers couldn't get in there. What they would do, the big ocean-going tankers would drop it off to a barge. And actually, these barges were actually concrete barges. And they float, you'd think concrete floating, but they were concrete, naturally with the concrete and wood and everything like that. So the big tankers would load them up. Now we'd pick up from them. We'd pick up a little here, a little there, and then go to different ships and that, and go to different islands, taking it from place to place. That was very, very interesting,
Were you ever in
But I was fortunate.
danger?
No, being on a small ship like that, we were always behind. But actually, we were ready. Actually, if we were going into Japan, the whole area was ready to go. You know what I mean? Everybody was on an alert deal to go.
Yeah.
In fact, my brother at that time, he left Pearl Harbor, and I think he went to Guam. I think he was ready to leave from Guam with the bomb disposal group. And so then the war ended. Then the only thing when the war ended, okay, when are we going home? So I came.
When did you finally...
The war ended in August. The Pacific, that ended in August. I came home in November. The end of November, right after Thanksgiving.
So you came home to...
I actually came home to my aunt
Queens?
in Brooklyn. Yeah, well, we hung out in Queens. That was between my aunt and my sister in Flushing and my aunt in Brooklyn. I was hopping back and forth. Then when I started to work with my uncle here, I got an old car, an old wreck of a car. It wasn't a wreck, was it? Yeah, it wasn't a wreck. Yeah, and it was a good car. In fact, I bought it from Uncle Al Ferrara from Ferrara's grocery store. So I traveled back and forth to Woodhaven and here all the time. No, I'd stay with my aunt, and then weekends I'd go down and what do you call it, to Woodhaven and Richmond Hill, actually, that both area. But one thing, what I would do, I would leave here on Saturday. I'd leave here on Saturday night and go down here, but I'd come back Tuesday morning. And the reason for that is, and Uncle said, wanted to take, well, that's my old horn, so you can stay down there for a couple of days and everything. So I'd work Saturday and then be off Sunday. And in fact, we were closed on Sunday at that time. We were closed. And then I'd stay down there in Queens and on Monday, and I'd start back up on Tuesday morning. In fact, the summertime, I tell you, my mother and father met at Rockaway Point before the First World War. Well, each family was pitching tents. So actually, when both families built bungalows, then the families were there. And so anyway, I spent every summer, all my childhood, in Rockaway Point. And so anyway, in this time of the year now, it was summertime, I was going to Rockaway Beach. And on Monday morning, I'd bring my uncle. I'd drive up with my uncle to the city. He worked for Guaranteed Trust, I think, at that time. And my brother was out of the, my brother a little older than me was out of the service. He worked for Western Electric. And in fact, my whole family, all four of us worked for Western Electric sometime in our life, in summer times or something. But my brother worked for them for a while. And I used to take the two of them in on Tuesday morning, then come up here and continue to work.
So you didn't take part in that 52-20 deal?
No way. No. But anyway, but as I said, I was fortunate. I mean, I was behind any problems, you know. And but a lot of the fellows, like the fellows in the VFW, I mean, you hear some of the stories.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Is there anything else that you can think of about Hastings during the war, or right after the war?
Right after the war, there was a lot of dances and parties, and you know, and everybody's trying to help the servicemen.
Where were the dances held? Like the Southside Club?
Well, like Southside Club and the VFW, and the American Legion really wasn't built at that time. And then throughout the county, there were county deals. In fact, Playland and over in that area, they had big functions.
Well, how would they help the servicemen? They would charge?
Well, you'd give them some type of stipend. Most of it was a USO type of setup. And then the local people here would do everything on their own, you know what I mean, to help the fellas, you know, because none of the fellas really had any money, you know. I mean, and most of the fellas were all in, I should imagine, the 20 to 30-year-old bracket, 20 to 35-year-old bracket, you know. And some of them went back to their old jobs after a short while, and then some of them just were out of work. And then they had different fundraisers, like the VFW had fundraisers. And
this is after the war?
After the war. And they'd have fundraisers, and they have different fundraisers to pay off the mortgage for the building, because there was a mortgage on it. The First World War veterans bought the building, you know, and gradually paying it off and everything like that. And then the Second World War veterans wound up paying the whole thing off, you know. So, but then the American Legion started up on their own. In fact, I belong to both of them, actually. I'm active in both, actually, also.
And in Hastings, the guys that came back from the service that you knew, did they seem to settle back into a normal kind of life pretty fast?
They settled into a private life, but a lot of fellows were sort of upset, because I would say half of the fellows, see, when you got out, you had 90 days to make up your mind whether you would go back in as the same rank you had. Like I came out as a quartermaster, and I could go right back in as a quartermaster, but I couldn't go back to the ship I was on, unless by chance they would do something. You could go back in, but I'd say about maybe, I don't know, half the fellas were on the edge for 90 days. In fact, I was myself. I mean, I just said, well, I don't know, do I want this, do I want that, you know, and things weren't still back to normal on the home front. I mean, there was still, I guess, I don't know if rationing was still going on. Gasoline was gradually offered, but I mean, I don't know about food rationing, you know, if beef was still available or you needed special deals to get anything. But it gradually came, things came back to normal. I know tires, we had trouble getting tires, you know, and we'd get maybe 2 tires a week or something like that, you know.
For a long time after the war,
yeah.
huh?
And then the thing is, with the tires, most of them were recaps. They take old tires and recap, but the new ones were coming out very slow, because I guess the rubber deal, the government didn't have the rubber to match. But then they had the synthetic rubber, which wasn't good. I mean, you could never do the speed you're doing today with those tires. They'd blow out. You know, I mean, in fact, a lot of them did blow out, but naturally you didn't have the super highways at that time, no throughway or anything. In fact, even going back years before, when my uncle was courting my hand, he would have to go down Broadway, all the way down into the city, over the Queensboro Bridge, out the Queens Boulevard and Woodhaven Boulevard. It'd take him almost 2 hours going out there.
Wow.
You know, and that's before all Triborough bridges and everything like that. So but anyway, as far as the like the VFW had ran bingos and that things like that, and then a lot of the fellas went to school under the GI Bill, which was good. And then the GI Bill gave them a lot of. I think you could even go to tap dancing school or something like that. I mean, it was they could do anything. It was out there for the veterans to grab if they wanted it. You know what I mean? And still today there's a lot out there for the veterans if they go looking for it. You know what I mean? You go see the people in charge. There's a lot of things out there. But most of the fellas did go back to work. Like with Anaconda, they started to perk up on the normal deal and all Havishore and the sugar factory and the county and town.
I wonder what happened. So many women had gone to work at Anaconda when the soldiers and sailors came back. What happened to the women? Do you have any idea?
No, a lot of them still worked there. A lot of them worked up until closing time. I mean, there was in fact, even Rosie the Riveter really came out of Tarrytown, out of the Chevrolet, Eastern Aircraft in Tarrytown.
Yes.
In fact, people behind us, they worked for Eastern Aircraft, rather she did, and then he did after he did. I guess before he went into service and when he came back until it went into the full Chevrolet operation. But a lot of the women, they just they continued on working, and as they were having families, like a lot of them were single, then they wound up getting married and having families and that. And but most of the fellas went back to work. You know, I mean, it's somewhere or another. I mean, they found jobs in some manner. You know, and some of them went. Joined the husbands in the service too. I mean, if they were a fellow was stationed in Jersey somewhere, or South Carolina or something like that, and the veteran was going to be there for a while, they would go and stay with them. This was during the war.
Right.
But then they came back and they'd settle down. But the families and the local people were really good to the veterans. I mean, they'd help them out every chance they got, you know, and they, in fact, a lot of them would have a supper for them. You know, come on, 5 of you come over tonight, I'll give you a meal, you know, coffee and cabbage or steak or something else like that, you know. I mean, they were really, really, really good to the veterans.
Now, when did you move to Hastings?
Well, I actually moved to Hastings in 46, I guess, 46, 1946. Yeah, because I got out at the end of 45, I moved in 46, you know. In fact, I lived with my aunt for a while, and so then I eventually moved into a room up McCartan's house on Whitman Street, and I roomed up there. In fact, there were 4 of us rooming in there, and there was in different 4 men as bachelors, you know. In fact, all ex-servicemen. And they worked in different places, and they just come and go, and all you do is sleep there. I mean, you wouldn't, no eating or anything else like that. But Mrs. McCartan was great. She'd always slip us some type of cake or something, you know, and it was. But then.
I think that had to do with the end of the war, not so much housing, new housing that, that.
Well, no, I don't think as much as housing as far as fellas just being bachelors. You know what I mean? It was maybe there wasn't enough room at home, or maybe they want to be out on their own. And in fact, the fellas up there, they were all right. In fact, all of us were bachelors, and 3 of us didn't actually have a full family like in town, and but it was good, you know. And then actually one thing that's great, I keep telling these fellas in the restaurants, we used to, when you're young, you don't have any money. So when you get paid, you'd say you couldn't blow it all, you know. So the Center Restaurant, when it was owned by actually George Lucretius, who's still on Main Street here. He and John Contos was another. In fact, John Contos was in the Army. But you could buy a meal ticket. You would give them, like, you'd get paid on Friday. You would walk in there and you'd give them, I forget that time, $20 or $25, and they'd give you a ticket, and they'd have their railroad punch. You'd eat there tonight, and all right, of course, 50 cents, 75 cents. You're already paid. You give them your ticket, they punch out that much. And so by Wednesday, when you were broke, you'd still have that ticket, you'd be able to eat. You'd still be able to eat. And so that worked out very good. And it was really amazing how they, you would do it. You'd do that the first thing. I have to eat for the week before I start spending any money here.
Yeah,
Here, George, here's $25, and he'd give you the ticket.
Yeah.
You just, as if meat, you punch it out, And it was really, really, really good. But now, as far as different trainings and that, I tell you, it's the training the service gives you. It's great. I mean, I honestly, I don't know if I should say it or not. I think all children should get some type. I don't say military, not guns, but training where they can get up early in the morning, get on a deal, show how it is to exercise early in the morning and get home at night and this and that. I think, geez, if every child had 1 year of some type of rigorous training, get away from mama, get away from mama. I don't mean military. I
know what you're saying, yeah.
Just to get away and see what the outside world is like and learn the different things of other people.
Yeah.
But now it's with me. I'm active in the American Legion and the VFW Post. It's something that I'm not retired. I'm still working. But what I do is I do paperwork in the morning at home. Then I'll go in at noontime or 1 or 2 o'clock, something like that.
Did you know any of the servicemen who got killed during the war?
Some of my friends out in Long Island, but I didn't know anybody
Didn't
here.
know anybody here.
I didn't know. So as I say, I didn't know that many
Right.
people at the time. But out in Queens, actually, I had 3 or 4 friends that were killed, and other ones had some type of deal, losing a leg or this, that, or some type of maim deal, But they lived through it. And I tell you, you go, like we here at the VFW, every year we go up to and usually in September, we go up to Montrose and treat the veterans up there with hot dogs, hamburgers, and that, a luncheon, and one day. And it's great. And all of them, they're out of it, sort of. I mean, they're in wheelchairs, and they really don't sort of know. The most alert fella up there that we've got, in the last 2 years he's been there, the most alert fella up there is a fella from the World War I. And he sort of has all his marbles, but the other fellas are really a different type of sicknesses. Yeah. It's between mental and up in that hospital it has to be mental, but then you have all sorts of other problems, And okay, so that's about it, I guess.
So,
I don't know if there's anything else. I don't know if there's anything else on here.
We can always add something at another point if you remember anything that you want to say. Mainly about what was going on here in Hastings.
Well, when I came back, I really didn't know anybody when I came back here. So I just worked and met fellas through coming around the garage and that type of thing. And but my haunts were still out in Woodhaven, so I was going back there. In fact, and I used to go down there a lot.
How did you and Ann get together?
I don't know, just by walking by the garage. She lived in the house right alongside the street. I don't know.
How many times did you walk by?
But she was just a school kid. She was still in high school, actually, And I tell you, yeah, actually the one that really introduced us in the beginning was Pete Bruning. And a lot of the old timers remember Pete. Pete was actually, he was in the Navy Air Force. And his mother and father had the Bruning's ice cream parlor. It's right where the Guerrero television is now. And it was the old German-style ice cream parlor, you know, the beautiful mirrors, counters, tables, and everything like that, and maple walnut ice cream, you know. He was real German, you know, but a nice guy, a great guy. And actually, what happened with Pete, I knew Pete. I knew Pete from actually Navy deals and that, and then we were good friends, and we went a couple of vacations, like up to Lake Placid, skiing and everything else like that. And we came back. Then we hung around together for a while now, because Pete he's actually older than me, but he's a state trooper, and now he's actually retired. He lives in Florida. But this house here now, this belonged to his mother and father. And it was really strange how you keep your wheels going all the time. Ann and I, when we first got married, we lived in Yonkers. Her sister Marie Falvo, and so then we lived there about 8 months. And then anyway, Miss Pingree and Miss Stetson lived in this house, the second floor. Bruni's lived in the first floor. Mr. and Mrs. Bruni, Pete when he was here, lived in the first floor. Miss Pingree, the history teacher up at the school, which everybody knew, and Miss Stetson, the librarian, which everybody knew, lived on the second floor. So they were trying to sell a house, but the Brunis were such nice people. Whoever bought this house had to let those people stay in the house. In fact, they were in the house, I think, before Bruning bought the house. They were here, and so they bought it with them in it. And so when they were selling it, they had to be in it, stay in it. So that was over a good many years. So some people wanted the house, but they didn't want anybody in it. Bruning said no. So I suggested, hey Pete, how about if you rent downstairs to me, Ann and I, because the mother and father are going to move over the store and live over the store and work the ice cream parlor, luncheonette, chocolatier downstairs and live over the store in preparation for retirement. So I said to Pete, how about you mother and father rent the downstairs to Ann and I? I said, I'll watch the house, I'll take care of it. And he had his car in the garage here. So I guess they did. So when it came time to, when they were going to retire and sell out everything, they said, Bob, we're going to retire, go to Florida, we're going to sell the business, sell the house, sell the business and that, but you have first option to buy. So, which he told me previously, you know, so I said, oh sure, gladly, yeah. Here we are with 2 kids, I think, or 3 kids, working 24 hours a day practically, you know, and so I went to the different banks and this and that, and oh boy, this is rough, you know, no big down payment or anything like that. So anyway, I spoke to Ethel O'Leary, which is the best friend anybody could have in Hastings as far as a banking woman. She was in the old county trust. And so I just checked with a couple of banks, and then she and Everett Brown, the guy that was the president of the bank, sent me over to the Savings and Loan. It was across the street at that time, but just before that was down where the paper shop was, the little Hastings Savings and Loan. So anyway, I went over there, and they watched out the window for me to go in there, and they watched for me to come out, you know. And they saw me sort of smiling when I came out. But anyway, it was, in fact, Les Jenkins was the bank president at that time. So anyway, it worked out with very little down payment. I forget what, I think it was something like $1,500 down payment. But in the meantime, this was over a period of, maybe, you know, it takes time, over a period of a month. And you know, I said, it was the best diet I ever went on. I lost about 10 pounds. I did from worrying, you know, we're going to lose this, that. But I know I sort of understood through Pete that his father would carry a mortgage if it had to be, but he didn't want to. But it had to be. So that's how we wound up buying the house, and that was in 1948. 1948 we bought the house, so we've been here ever since, And so finally, Miss Stetson retired and left, and Miss Pingree, she moved up to the Hastings house apartment. Then she retired, and I think she took sick while she was here. And both of them, Miss Stetson came from Maine, from Brunswick, Maine, and Mr. Pingree came from Delavan, New York. Where at that time all the teachers came from upstate New York, all of them, Miss Davy and all of them. So then, that's how we wound up, and we're still here in the same house on the end of the street. Yeah. So.
Thank you very much. For
I don't know of anything else that I could talk to you about. I mean, is there nothing really?
If you think of something, we can always get back together for and add a couple of minutes to it. So.
Yeah, and then during the war, there's a lot of all we had was of email. You'd fill out these little things, and the captain would read it and okay it, but that's on a small ship. The captain would he'd look at you and he'd seal the thing up, and that was it. So whatever you said was okay. Because there's really no danger really there. They're always worried about somebody intercepting a important message, but it all worked out good. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Abby. It's very